Hi, Misha here, and I hope everyone is having a good January 2023. And in this video, I thought we would talk about 6 submachine guns and my semi-auto variants, or builds, chambered for 7.62 by 25 Tokarev. But that's kind of the backdrop. In the past, I used to do a series called Storytime. Kind of miss doing those. I thought I might bring it back. So in this video, while I will talk about some service history and details, I'm mostly going to give just personal thoughts and accounts and anecdotes. Let me know how you like it if you want me to start maybe doing those videos again. Also, as we enter into a new year, I'm needing to do a bit of a Patreon drive. So this is a bit of a promotion for that, and if you can, maybe go over and sign up. Even just $1 a month really helps, and more importantly, you get to participate in Q&As, and the more questions we get faster, the more often we can do Q&As. And I know some people have accepted Fox, other people have said other things, but please understand that A, he's my family, he's my cousin. B, he wanted to be involved, which is always good to have someone who wants to be involved in anything. And see, guys, I can't drive. I'm blind, so I can't just go to the range on my own. And also understand that my abilities are limited. The histories and all that I can do. But if you want anyone to really give you feedback on accuracy, range, sights, scopes, that ain't me. And that is Fox. And I think it does give a really good thing for a younger generation to chime in. So those who've accepted him, thank you very much. We both greatly appreciate it. Those who are still warming up realize that he's, again, my family, and in a lot of ways is a lot like me. So, yeah, just, be patient, give him a chance. He's still kind of learning the ropes and finding his groove. No one jumps into this full time. And because of the whole point of this video, there will be 2 different cuts, 2 different edits, if you will. One for YouTube, and an extended version with outtakes and bloopers for Patreons. M56, first shots.
Top eject, huh?
The YouTube edit, like I said, will be a little more trimmed down, a little shorter, more straight to the point, and I'll still do story times elements. I have some stories definitely to tell about this gun and all of these, but I'll try to kind of keep it to the point. And I really am asking you, if you're new to the channel, if you can, please consider Patreon, because you know how YouTube goes, and the rising cost of getting things. We do have new guns coming. In fact, I just paid for them yesterday. The guns here aren't T&E on this channel. They're all guns that I purchase, which is why we're able to give like 6-month review updates as well. But we need to kind of generate some funding, and it would really be grateful. If you can't, I understand. It's tight times for all of us, but here included. So, again, if you can, that helps a lot. And enough said. Plus, like I said, there will be the extended version of this video over on Patreon, which may or may not get interesting. We'll see. But with that, the spiel out of the way, at the very least, if you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. And also, please do comment. We try to engage with everyone in the comments below. And with that, we'll dive back in to Soviet Russia, who was actually the largest user of submachine guns in all of World War II. The PP-SH-41, the Papa Shah, the burp gun, and I actually have 2 examples to show you here because they happen to be available. This is a recent build, actually barreled in 9mm, which actually does have historical precedence. This was done by MAKARMS recently. And this is my old trusty gun that was built a long time ago by TNW for military gun supply, and it was one of the very first deals I ever struck as a very young novice, read pretty idiotic FFL dealer. And actually my history with this gun goes back quite a ways. If it wasn't the first full auto I ever fired, the Papa Shah, the PPSH-41, was one of the very first full autos I ever fired. Definitely as an adult gun collector, it was the first one. And that was pretty thrilling, and I in no way, shape, or form could have purchased it. Even the semi-auto like this, I looked at on the military gun supply website for literally years drooling over, and could not purchase it. We all start somewhere, guys. And my interest in Russian and Soviet guns goes way back, not just the Kalashnikov. Of course, I lived there for a time, visited there several times. Story for another day, really. But not only does this have a lot of personal history, the PPSH-41 has a lot of history in Russia. As I said, they were the largest user of submachine guns in World War II. Now, when they adopted the Tokarev cartridge 7.62x25, it was basically a magnum version of 7.63x25 Mauser used in the C96. Okay, they had trials for a new pistol, which would become the Tokarev TT-30 and then TT-33, and they started having testing for submachine guns in the early 30s, but it was a very low priority. Nevertheless, it resulted in the PPD-34, the Dityev submachine gun, which was a version of the MP-28 Bergman, kind of like the Lanchester we see from England and many other things. But not many of those were made. Now, the 34 fed from 25-round box mags. It would be updated with the 34-38, which was the first to use a drum, but not this style of drum. It was a 73-round drum with a neck. Well, not many of those got made. In fact, the whole submachine gun program was temporarily shut down in 1939 before Dityev went to Stalin kind of crying, and it was started back up. This happens to have been the right thing, but that's how nepotism worked in the Soviet Union. And so, by the time of the Finnish War, the Winter War, they had a few thousand in the Red Army. Experiences in that war led to the PPD-40, which was the first to have a necklace drum, kind of inspired by the KP-31 Suomi. The 40 drum was not interchangeable with the 41, but very similar. The PPD-40 was also the first gun to have a chrome-lined bore. The overall length of the PPD-40 was around 32 inches, had a nearly 11-inch barrel, about around 7 some odd pounds. You get the idea. Pretty conventional select fire open bolt gun for that day and time. But only around 100,000, 95 to 100,000 were made in total, with the PPD-40 being the most common version. Now that I've given you a little bit of a background, as brief as I could, the Spagen. In 1940, the designer, who had served in the Revolution decades earlier, turned inventor, thought he could make something quicker and easier to mass produce and much more reliable. Already by 1940, towards the end of the year, small production batches had been made for testing, and by 41 it was entering into production. And he cut the number of parts down from 95 to 87. The chrome line bore became a standard feature. It was about 10.5 inches, a little bit shorter than the PPDs. The gun was a little heavier, though, about 8 pounds. And he went to an improved necklace drum. Here's one in its pouch. Actually, 2 drums were issued. Still firing the Tokarev round. Early on, it had an adjustable sight, but very soon they'd go to flippy. As you can imagine, with Germans coming, it was simplified. And it worked. They were able to actually get production under 6 hours per gun. They were even able to basically have any place in the world make them. The only parts that needed any kind of specialized anything were the bolt, the front end, the barrel. Everything else was just simple stampings, wood stock. And it still was select fire. Switch here, forward for auto, and back for single shot. You had a safety on the bolt, and it had a hinged system here where it opens up. That go to the threaded cap. It was definitely the gun that Russia needed for a war they weren't really ready to fight. And they would build 6 million. A little bit more than the PPD. And it became very, very popular and respected. Using a drum to support another drum in a gun. That works. Now, originally, yeah, the drum was it. In 1942, though, they first developed this 35-round stick mag. Now, this is a double stack but single feed mag. That's so it can work with the same mag well as the drum, which was, of course, single feed. And they would make some improvements and even some refinements throughout the war, and production would end in 1947. But service would continue into Russia into the 50s when it was finally replaced by newer things, SKS, AK. But then Russia would donate thousands, millions to China, who would end up building it as the Type 50, and North Korea, who would adopt it as the Type 59, and so it would get a reputation, a mostly positive one, in the Korean War. That's where the burp gun name comes from. From there, it would actually migrate to Vietnam, who had used it as the K-50, or K-59, I can't remember which. And it would appear in Vietnam into the 70s. So it had some legs. But that's the military select fire. Now, in a perfect world, I'd love for all my guns to be military select fire. But over the years, I've learned to not only accept, but even kind of enjoy semi-automatic rebuilds, using as many original parts as possible. It's a bit of an engineering challenge. And the back and forth was, for years, hammer-fired or striker-fired. Striker, like this one up here, usually has a better trigger, and it lets you use close to the original sear, but it's not as reliable. It gets a little weird with the springs. And also, some strikers can have a very stiff mainspring when you charge it. Hammer, you have a lighter mainspring to charge with, and you typically have a pretty reliable hit, but the trigger can be meh to poor. But it does have another advantage. This has that hinged open thing. When you have a striker gun like this and it's hinged open, if it's cocked and there's a round in the chamber or even a magazine, and you open this thing, guess what? Pressure comes off the sear, the block, it can go forward and possibly detonate. Well, one way that's earlier manufacturers, like I think it was Interarms, might have been in Ordnance too. I think Atlantic even had some. They would sometimes weld this closed back here, meaning to take it apart, you just remove this screw up here. Not a big deal. But that was one way. And there's a whole back and forth. Wise Light did some. It took years to get a even halfway mass production version of this that worked halfway reliably. I settled on the T&W here. It seemed the best. And as I said at the beginning of this video, it was one of my earliest deals. I had just gotten my FFL. I actually called T&W to see if they'd sell me one, and they said, well, they were really polite about it. They said we would, but this was a contract we did for Dave at Military Gun Supply. He supplied the kits and things, the funding. We built them from him. But they said, well, let us call him, see if we can work out something, because I explained who no one knew me, and no one knows me now. But no one really knew me then, except my dog Prince. So T&W bent over backwards. They reached out to Military Gun Supply, and they called me Military Gun Supply. And they said, yeah, if you're, not going to compete with this, you're not going to sell them below cost, and, you're not looking to buy 100, we'll sell you a few. And they also sold me magazines, drums, slings, the whole kit and caboodle, and gave me a good deal. And that was a great introduction. That was probably within a year of me obtaining my FFL 01. And I sold them. Now you see there's two different ways of doing this with the barrel. The way MAKARMS does, they have an extended barrel here with the original length shroud. This is great because if you want an SBR, the barrel comes out. Not so great in the sense you have this sticking out. What military gun supply had them do was actually take two shrouds, put them together, and they put an extension on the original barrel. This gun has the original 7.62 30 caliber barrel. This one's actually a 9mm with the US barrel, but that's okay because actually not only did Germany rebarrel these in 9mm, other countries did as well. The Germans called it the MP41R. And when they issued it still in 7.62 Tokarev, they were in luck there too because their 7.63 Mauser cartridges would fit it. They called that the MP717R. Either way, there's pros and cons. This, generally speaking, looks better. It's less obvious at a glance. It's been extended out. This is more authentic, a little bit lighter, and more flexible. And you can pretty easily swap barrels on these too. But yeah, it was one of my first. All in all, I think I do prefer the hammer-fired, although Striker has some benefits. And we've had some really nice kits come in over the years. So before we move on, I'm going to ask you guys to comment below. What do you think? Do you like the PPSH 41, or is it a little too retro for you? And if you do you like it with the extended shroud or the short shroud and extended barrel? Again, in a perfect world, everything would be an SBR, everything would be a machine gun, but these had to be converted to closed bolt too. That's just something that's been a fact of life since 1981. So since I was a literal toddler, it's just life goes. I do like the folding mag catch on these two. It's a neat feature. That was because they were worried about them losing drums and mags. The snow. Really neat guns. But we better move on, I believe. And the next one, I also have a lot of early involvement with. There we go. See? I'm going to leave this in even the YouTube edit. We're hanging out, right? Like I said, this is story time. Let me know how you like these. Again, I'm just going off memory, sitting here late at night. Should be sleeping. Instead, rambling about communist guns. This was the best submachine gun of the Great Patriotic War, World War II. At least according to Mikhail Kalashnikov. And I'm definitely not one to argue with him. You can if you want, but he was there. The PPS 43. This was made by Spajan, the PPSH, Shaw, and this was Sudiev, Alexei Sudiev. In the beginning, he kind of picked this design from a bureau in 41, 42, and it was to have a easier to produce, lighter weight for reconnaissance submachine gun. There was originally consideration of replacing PPSH production with the PPS, but it wasn't economical, feasible, and both guns complement each other very well. As you can tell, this has a folding stock. Originally, the PPS 42s was a little bit longer. It has a slightly shorter barrel, just a little under 10 inches compared with the PPSH 41s. The 41 did have a basic muzzle check, muzzle compensator. This still has a pretty simple one, but a little more effective. No wood on it, and really important for the war and for the future of Russian production, it was built with rolled steel and early stampings. Also a lot of welding and riveting. Bakelite style grips, and of course it was an open bolt, whereas the 41 was select fire. This was this was automatic only, but it had a much lower rate of fire, 600, 650 rounds versus up to 900 with the Papa Shaw. So yeah, it also, and this is another thing very important, fed from different magazines here. And there's a good reason for it. You know, often today people think that when manufacturers have their guns take proprietary mags, it's because they want to sell mags. Sometimes that might be true, but sometimes it's because a new design is called for and is better. The PPSH-41, because it was built to work on the same magwell, and there goes my cord, built to work on the same magwell as the drum, has this single feed, kind of like a grease gun. That can be problematic for loading and feeding. The 42 and 43 had double stack, double feed mags. Better in every conceivable way. And it kind of returned to having a bit of a neck or a magwell, but it did double as a foregrip. The design was slightly updated for the 43. That's just kind of how Russia rolled. They would do a small production batch, work out some kinks, and then go into mass production. So really the PPS-42 was a large pre-production run that was used against the Germans and the Finns in 1942 and 43. They made some changes, and by mid-year 1943, the improved 1943 variant was in production. And they were able to produce a lot of these. And of course, this is very famous, very iconic for the 900-day siege of Leningrad. They were produced primarily at the Sitsaretsk factory, but much like with the 41, very few components needed special creation. It was an even simpler gun. In fact, they could build these in about half the time of the 41, under 3 hours per gun. And more importantly, for war-torn Russia, it took less than half the steel. And it's a lighter gun, under 7 pounds, good for reconnaissance, and of course much more compact. With the stock deployed, it's almost the same length as the 41, but with it folded up, it's nearly a foot shorter, only about 2 feet long. And this is one of the earliest folding stocks. Production would actually end in 1946, so even before the 41, but they would continue in use within Russia for several years, and they would be used and produced outside of Russia, including in Poland, which could bring us to this gun. Poland would actually start using these in 1943, and they adopted the PPSH-41 as the PMWZ-41. Well, eventually they would begin production at what we think of as FB Radom today, Circle 11, in 1948, calling it the PMWZ-43 initially, and primarily building them in the early 50s. They were one of the biggest builders outside of Russia. But with 2 million built, it goes to show you that Russia had over 8 million submachine guns in the war, including over 100,000 Thompsons that were given by the USA. But what about this gun, this semi-auto, and everyone's favorite IO and Pioneer arms? I think these were the first Pioneer guns I ever had. There was an early use in the American market, and at that time they were imported by Royal Tiger IO Incorporated. And much like with the PPSH-41, I did some early business with them when I was a young FFL. It was great because these things were cheap, like $250 out of Poland with 4 mags, cleaning rod. And at that time, no one really knew who Pioneer was, although we did know who IO was. But I will say, they were very friendly to me, cut me a good deal. I ordered in advance, and I was, I think, the first dealer to get these because I was comparing notes with others who had ordered them, like Centerfire Systems over in Kentucky, and called them up and said, hey, they came in, did you get yours? And they said, no, you stinker, how do they look? So I actually ran out and shot one that afternoon, and immediately found out that the spring on the firing pin wasn't strong enough, which led to slam firing. Luckily, that was an error that is kind of understandable. They claimed that they were test firing them with different ammo in Poland. I believe them, because 7.62 Tokarev, there's so many ammo loadings, it's really hard to get it to work with, say, commercial Winchester, and then surplus crap from Czechoslovakia from the 60s. You know, it's just how it goes. Anyway, that was an early, fun thing to learn about them. But they did take care of it. I think they also gave a stronger recoil spring for the closed bolt. But what these were, they took original, probably unissued, because they were made in the 50s, Circle 11 kits, including, at least at the time, original chrome line barrels. And this front section's original. They split them here, making this rear section a new U.S. made receiver. Notice the dimple on the top to keep a full auto bolt from being put in. And they even had the original top folding stock, but it was just pinned, welded, closed, along with the foregrip. I'm really happy the ATF let them do that. As I mentioned earlier, there are some downsides to doing striker fired with these kind of hinged guns. You know, push the button in the back. In fact, it's even more dangerous with a PPS 43 pistol. On a 41, you know, you're not probably going to hit that accidentally, but theoretically you could drop this on the ground and that'd pop open, letting your striker go forward. So almost all of these have always been hammer fired. And that seems to be, if there's a weak point in the gun, the Pioneer trigger group here is a little flimsy. I've heard of them breaking. It's mostly, I think, cast parts. But considering they cost a dealer $250 at the beginning and they were retailing for about $350, you know, I think people were okay with that. And they were good guns at that time for that money. A military style blued finish. Like I said, they came with spare mags. And while this may not get quite the attention of the 41, it's a lot of fun, and it's actually quite shootable as a pistol, thanks to the gripping here and here, the overall weight, and the fact that it's in the Tokarev caliber. So yeah, it was an early thing for me, and it's neat that this is technically a Polish gun, built over there, and relatively mass production. IO was the original importer, then they disappeared, and then they came back with PAC USA being the importer. That's a whole thing. Although I will say, recently we've done a video looking at the PAC Sporter AKM, and the first couple of range trips so far, it has performed well. If you get one of these, just understand that it is a kit gun built from surplus parts, converted from open to closed bolt, from full auto to semi-auto. Again, a fun range toy. Not what I would pick as my home defense gun, though. Flipping it over. Whereas with the 41s, you can debate a few things. With these, you really do have to do hammer fired, and doing them as a pistol is great. There's absolutely no real reason to consider it a carbine unless you live in an area where you can't have a pistol. Because if you want to SBR it, you can just pop the whatever's holding the stock closed. On these, it was pretty straightforward. Of course, you can do a barrel extension if needed. But, yeah, no real gripes with them. I mean, it would be great if maybe a nicer company, like if WBP had done these conversions, or actually FB rated them themselves, I'm sure they would have been a little nicer. They also would not have been $300. Let's just be straight. I'm happy with it then, happy with it now. It's a fun toy, it's a fun thing, and I do like that so many of the components are original. Really only your section back here and your trigger are new made. Even the bolt is original, even if it's modified. Even the safety works the same. When it's on, it actually locks the bolt in position, just like on an original. So yeah, Poland made a good deal with it, and it's neat to have a semi-auto from there. And having these two, I thought for a long time would be good. These are the two main Tokarev submachine guns. So much history, so cool. And for a little while, I was content with just these two. For a little while. Hey YouTube, well, we're about halfway through this video. The bulk of it, of course, would be Russian submachine guns, because, well, it's their cartridge. But what do you think? If you haven't, drop a comment below. And if you could, do like, share, and subscribe. And again, the whole point of this video, let me know how you like these more story time oriented tellings. Typically story times are a lot shorter, but, you know, this is a little bit of a different thing. And also, again, $1 and up a month on Patreon. You can participate in Q&As. And I think now that we've done a couple of tests, we probably will start doing some live streaming very soon. Either for all of YouTube or maybe just for Patreons or both. And then there's some other tiers and things. You can go read if you're interested, but I'd greatly appreciate it if you would give it a consideration. And with that, let's talk about a subgun from Zastava here, which is a manufacturer that has become very popular in America thanks to the ZPAP in Zastava, USA. Meet the M4957. SA-26. Now you would think with Russia producing millions of submachine guns in World War II plus everyone else, a lot of other post-war countries would just take what they could get. And for the most part, that's what happened. For the rest of the video, the guns we're going to talk about were made in the hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands, not millions. Because most countries, if they wanted to ally with the comm bloc, would take guns from Russia or China. But Yugoslavia was different. It wasn't part of the Warsaw Pact, often identifying itself as the leader of the Third World, which was not a derogatory term. It was just, unaligned to some extent. They did their own thing, sometimes with licenses, sometimes without. And the M49 often gets pigeonholed as a PPSH-41 clone. It's not, though. And I'll be honest, I was guilty of kind of thinking that too. I mean, I knew it had some differences, but I kind of just thought it was the same type of gun. So I wasn't super interested in getting one. And back in the day, while you could find 41 and 43 kits, a lot of the other kits only appeared in more recent years. Now, Dave Bowman has started importing quite a few 49 kits, but this gun's actually built from an old display gun that came in the shop a few years ago as trade that a guy had for a very long time. It's kind of neat because it still has the Yugo crest on top, and while it has an extension on it, it actually does have the original 10.5-inch barrel. So, how is it similar to the 41, the Papa-Shaw? Well, it does fire the same cartridge, and it actually feeds from the 35-round single feed mag. Zastava made their own mags, but Russian drums would also fit in it. It also has a very similar fire control group, single and full. It does have a slower rate of fire, about 750 versus around 900. And it has a very similar mag catch. And the stock isn't dissimilar for the most part either. It's a little bit longer, at about 34.5 inches. And believe it or not, it's actually heavier, at about 8.25 pounds. But that's about, well, and it does have a flip rear sight 2 position, pretty similar. So in the broad strokes, it's the same, but in reality, it actually takes more from Berettas and other things. From the right side, the differences become more apparent. This is a tubular steel receiver, machined tube, very different styling, and this actually has a quick removable barrel feature. You can unlatch the barrel up here, pulling it out. It also even ejects towards the left, a little different. And the charging handle, cocking handle, actually reminds me of something more like the Beretta 38 versus this. And kind of like with the PPD, it has a threaded end cap. Now the big difference between the 49 and the 4957 is the 49 had a captive recoil spring, little kind of like a Beretta 38A, whereas the 57 had more like the Beretta 44, where it's just a more standard spring. There were a few other minor changes, but that's the biggest one that comes to mind off the top of my head. The stock looks the same, but the butt plate always cracks me up on these. This is a Mauser Car 98 inspired cupped butt plate, although it still retains the trapdoor for a cleaning kit in there. It's just kind of an amalgamation of different features, and it's uniquely Yugoslavian, uniquely Zastava. So these were primarily built in the 50s, and actually were very quickly superseded by lighter, more modern guns, although they would stay in second line reserves use up until the early 70s, and they were exported to a handful of other countries, not many, but North Vietnam did receive some. It's just kind of an interesting side note, footnote. But it wasn't one I ever really set out to get, if I'm being honest with you. As far as making this into a semi-auto, folks, I mean, you gotta have the stock. There's no real way to do this as a pistol. And, you know, the nice thing is having a QD barrel, you're going to do something that makes it non-permanent if you want to ever SBR it. No, this really did turn out better than I expected, although the trigger is still not fantastic, but that's more just the design. If you ever mess with any of the striker-fired KP31s that TNW did back in the day, oh my god, the triggers on those. The hammer-fired ones are much better. But no, I'm happier with this than I thought I would be. It is a footnote in history, but it's a neat one, and it is definitely not just a Papa Shaw copy or clone, but it was very quickly superseded within Yugoslavia and just never really got out, and doing the build was pretty straightforward, and nowadays you can find the kits, so if you're interested in this, I've done a video in the past, or at least 2 of them I think on it. You can Google in the playlist. Well, let us move right on along. With this one, we're going back in time a bit, although not quite far back as the first 2. This is my Polish PPS 4352. I had MK Gun Mods do a few of these, back in 2014, 2015, because the kits were available. And they were all based on the Pioneer PPS-43C, the pistols, because they were so affordable. Now, this is one of the PAC USA guns. This one is actually my original PPS-43C. And the reason I opted to use this to convert was back when they first started bringing these in, the stocks were externally welded closed, so they had visible welds. Later they went to the internal system that looks nicer. So what we did here, the kits were very cheap. And it's kind of a weird thing. Now, the original PPS 4352, basically the same gun with a fixed stock. Now, the idea of putting a fixed wood stock actually dates back to 1944. Alexei Sudiev had a prototype. He even tried one with a folding bayonet, kind of like an M44 Mosin. But they never really went anywhere in Russia. But I guess someone in Poland either had the same idea or saw this and thought it would be a good idea. So, well, in 1952, at the Circle 11 factory, this version was put into somewhat limited production. This was still used by mechanized troops, so obviously it's smaller, more compact. This had the same barrel, but with the fixed stock, the idea was for prisoner guarding, guard posts, military field use. One of the complaints Poland had was they wanted a little more range, a little more control and automatic bursts out of the PPS-43, so they created the PM-WZ-4352 with a fixed stock. I don't know how successful it was, but it's something they did. And I'm not sure how many they made, but it's said in total that they made around 110,000 PPS-43s and 4352s within Poland. And really the difference is just the rear of the receiver, and the takedown has been moved to this lip here. The front end, of course, would be original. On this one, we put an extension on. Could have SBR'd it, but I'm fine with it. The idea was basically just to have a carbine version. The kits were cheap enough. The process was straightforward. Just cut the end off, weld on the end from the kit, and you were good to go. It was a lot of fun, simple, and made a lot of us very happy. So, YouTube, which do you like better? The kind of all-metal compact version, or do you kind of like the strange retro stock on it? This does attach with tangs top and bottom, plus there's a side screw, so it's very well secured. There's a screw here, and then side bolt. they didn't just slap it on. They did a really good job. A little bit longer of a receiver here. This ends here. This stretches back a bit. I would think that might slow the rate of fire down, but I'm not sure how much internal travel the bolt would have. May not matter at all. I don't know. It was a fun project. I'm glad I did it. I like weird, obscure guns, and this shows where Poland would sometimes just straight up copy what Russia had. And other times they would start to advent themselves, and as the decades would go on, Poland would do more and more of their own thing. You can see that in the AK videos and pistol videos, what have you. They weren't as independent as, say, Yugoslavia, but they did what they could to kind of have their own identity. It's also a lot of fun to shoot. This stock is actually quite comfortable. Then again, I like wood. Do you like wood? Who doesn't like wood? I guess we better move on, huh? You know, sometimes with a semi-automatic conversion, a build, it comes together very easily, like that M49. Sometimes it's very straightforward, like that PPS 4352. And sometimes you get this. From beginning to end, this project was just fraught with difficulties. We looked at the Yugo M4957. This is the Yugo M56. Much as the PPS H41 was the bigger brother to the PPS 43, this is the little brother to the 49. But these are very different guns. For those who know, this resembles an MP40. And that's primarily what they did copy here, down to the underfolding stock and Bakelite furniture. But, unlike the MP40, it has a threaded end cap. It doesn't have a handguard out front, or a resting bar, rather. It does have a bayonet lug, though. A different style of charging handle, different style of magazine. The MP40 was double stack single feed. This is actually double stack double feed. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of ways, but in other ways, it's also a bit longer, more comparable to this. Around the same weight. It's not as heavy as you might think, especially for being a Zastava. Barrel's a smidge under 10 inches. Yeah. And these were adopted in 56 and in mass production by 1961. And would actually continue on in production at Zastava after the end of Yugoslavia itself. So yeah, just had this here for comparison. But let's bring out its big brother and talk about the process of trying to make this work. So here they are, side by side. Yep, very different. It's easy to make the 49 work as a striker. I'm sure you could do a hammer too. The thing with the 56, the way the receiver's done, how far the trigger is back or feet all the way, just everything about it, the geometry's off. In fact, before even MK Gun or MAKARMS gave it a go, another builder that we'll end the video with, Gun Builds, sent me one that he had done as a striker. They just wouldn't run right. Tried making it work, sent it to MAKARMS. He tried making that striker work with the GBs, and it wouldn't. So ultimately had to try a hammer system, and even then had to tinker with that a couple of times. So all in all, there were basically 4 revisions to get it to run, and even then it never has been 100%. But it's okay. On top of that, these kits, as a lot of Yugoslavian kits, because of the wars and everything, were in pretty shape. They all had some wear and tear. For example, there's chipped Bakelite in the back here. It happens. Everyone had something like that. There was just lots of wear on things like the feed. And good thing is, these kits did have the original barrel. Bad thing is, a lot of them look like sewer pipes. A couple of barrels actually had to be thrown out, not just because of poor rifling, but because the chambers themselves were so eroded that bullets wouldn't actually seat properly to get ignited. It was a whole thing. So, yeah, you had to kind of go choosy through your kits and pick parts and do that to get one to run. At least we were able to keep the original safety here. That rotates down. Kind of neat. Latches up here. Does have the original mag release back here. The stock is the MP40 style. It is pinned closed. I definitely wouldn't SBR this one. I don't want to get married to a gun that's just finicky. It is neat, just especially if you like that battlefield look. But guys, once you take something to the range 6 different times, 3 or 4 different types of builds, you just kind of get tired of it. Its magazines are its own pattern. They hold 32 cartridges, double stack, double feed, but they are not interchangeable with the rest. Let me bring out the other mags real quick. Here is a PPS 41, same as the M49. Kind of a similar top piece here, but then of course single feed. And of course here is a PPS 43 double feed. But for whatever reason, they did not make these interchangeable. Probably because of the angles and stuff. Probably just wasn't in the cards to work with an MP40 style gun. But this is an improvement to go to a double feed over the MP40's single. So they definitely made some improvements. And it was a simple, relatively compact, relatively durable, relatively reliable gun. So it did complement the 49. In fact, by the 70s, it was pretty much replacing it in Yugoslavia. And these were exported in larger numbers around the world. M56. In the end, we had enough kits we could get together, and with the updated hammer firing system, we got these to run okay. But probably if I had known how much of a headache they would have been to get into in the beginning, it certainly would have maybe dissuaded me. I don't know. Oh well, it's done now. In the end, it's a neat gun, and it's kind of does complete my Tokarev submachine gun collection. We've got one more in this video, but other than what we have tonight, there's a Chinese couple of versions. There's their copy of the 41. There's also what they call the Type 79, which is a gas-driven gun, which is unique. And there's some other kind of thrown together things here and there. There was a couple of designs in East Germany. Most nations, though, like Hungary, Romania, if they had them, they just got them from Russia or China. Or they kind of skipped the whole submachine gun thing for the most part and went to the Kalashnikov, because that's really what ultimately spelt the doom to the submachine gun in the 1960s. Once assault rifles were, and that is the correct term in the military parlance, assault rifle, became common, especially once they started doing carbine versions. In Russia, you would eventually get the AKS-74U. In America, of course, there was the Kar-15 XM177 and so on and so forth. So once you could get a full-power rifle that wasn't really any more expensive or larger than these, at least for quite a long time, the submachine gun fell out of favor. It's nice to have both that were in Yugoslavia, though, but I'd say the two, I do like the 49 more. I'm just a sucker for wood and steel. It's so neat. Plus, again, I don't have that kind of attitude that I do for this one. The battlefield look is neat, but personally, I kind of wish the kits were a little better shape. But beggars can't be choosers. And again, at least we did get the original barrel. We had other accessories like extra mags, even bayonets come in with these, so that was neat. So this was almost a failure, but our next and final one was surprisingly very successful. Pretty much in every way, we're ending on a high note. The Czechoslovakian VZ or SA 24/, SA-26. We'll get to that in a minute. What an interesting gun with interesting features, and it was just a nice build process. And yeah, this was done by gun builds, and like I said, they had some trouble with the previous gun, but this one, nah, they did really well with. Had several of these built because these kits came in, and even today they're very inexpensive because it's not the easiest build in the world, and the kits are missing the barrels, so you have to do something about that. But if you put the time and energy in, to my mind, it's worth it. I brought the 4352 out again one more time because they kind of remind me of each other, and it's a good comparison. Both wood stocks, actually both were adopted in 1952, at least these versions. But notice how much shorter the Czech gun is. That's because, and I will say, this, like I said, has a 10-inch barrel. This actually has a barrel over 11 inches, plus the extension, of course. They get away with it because this has a telescoping bolt, like an Uzi. It also has the magazine and the grip, like an Uzi. But it's not a copy of an Uzi. It either predates the Uzi or is a concurrent design. Actually, in Czechoslovakia, work began on a new submachine gun way back in 1946. But they weren't in a hurry. And they were going to do it in 9mm. But in 1947, they decided they would consider 7.62 by 25 Tokarev because it is a good performing cartridge out of a long barrel. But in 1948, they thought, nah, we're gonna stick with 9mm. So they adopted what was known at the time as the M48A fixed stock, or M48B folding stock. So they were just getting these in production. They just went into service, but then in 1950-51, the Soviet Union, once the communists really achieved full control in Czechoslovakia, mandated they switch over to a standard Warsaw Pact combat caliber. So they had to rework the gun from 9mm 9x19 to 7.62 25 Tokarev. That could have been a disaster. And in fact, it didn't really do well for the VZ52 pistol, in my opinion. But for this subgun, turned out okay. So they reworked it. Originally they were known as the M4852 A and B, respectively. But soon they would kind of redo the naming convention. The 23 would be fixed stock 9mm. The 25 would be folding 9mm. The 24 would be fixed stock Tokarev. And the 26 would be folding stock Tokarev. So they adopted the Tokarev variants in 1952, and they had already produced a decent number of 9mm. Those were mostly quickly retired by the military and either handed down to the militia, the police, or they were sold abroad to a few nations, including eventually Cuba and South Africa. And communist meddling, what are you going to do? And they changed a little bit. For example, the 9mm mags were 24 or 40 rounds. When they did the Tokarev mags, they went to one size, 32 rounds. Pull it out here. Kind of a neat mag too. It is double stack, double feed, and it's kind of this neat trapezoidal shape. And that's not all of the cool features of this gun. Looking on the left side, like I said, we have a barrel around 11 inches. It's very recessed into the receiver because of the telescoping bolt. That also means we can have a quite short receiver. We have a wood stock here with a sling swivel on it, metal butt plate, and the secondary swivel up here for a reason we'll talk about in a minute. We have a pretty short pistol grip. The trigger on the military gun is actually staged, and we have a safety back here. Short pull for single shot, long pull for automatic in the original guns. This bolt handle is quite interesting. When you go to disassemble it, it actually retracts down in so you can pull the bolt out. A really slick system. We have a polymer Bakelite style handguard, grips. We have a 4-position rear sight, and we have a pretty slick end cap for disassembly. Flipping it over, one feature I always thought was cool is there is a speed loader of sorts. On the side, you put in stripper clips, and you insert your mag, and you feed them here. So it's a quick way to charge your mag in the field. I don't know why, I just find that cool. Hooded front sight. Side ejection port, pretty standard. Nice, clean, tubular lines on this. No grip safety, unlike a Uzi. It is much more compact than a lot of other guns, but it's well built. It's roughly 7 pounds, give or take. The variant, the 9mm were slightly lighter. The Tokarevs required a heavier bolt, and of course fixed or folding changes it. So anyway, they were adopted in 1952 in the Tokarev variant, and they were put into quick mass production. But actually production would slow down in 1961 or thereabouts, and actually end by 1968. They managed to turn out quite a few in, a decade and a half, but, its end was maybe a little premature because of the nation it came out of. As with several of the others, I had a few of these built for my shop a couple of years back. Now, they weren't built by MAKARMS MK Gun Mods previously, but they were built by a former partner and friend of his that this was his bag. For years he worked, like on the Weapons Guild, to get the perfect 24-26 running. It's something he was interested in. And after firing on myself, I kind of get it. It's a interesting machine gun. Czech guns, they have a quality all their own. Even if they're not the best in the world, there's just something alluring about them, at least to me. So, MAKARMS told me he was the guy to go to. And he's actually the one that pushed me. He asked me a couple of times if I wanted to do them. And he said, you should do it because the kits are cheap. And he said, look, I think it was Apex, had several that they were trying to sell. I said, call them up and see what they'll do if they'll cut you a deal. And I think I bought 20 kits. And yeah, they threw in a bunch of free accessories. They even gave me a case of Apex marked beer mugs. And some of them actually didn't come to me broken. Not their fault, but mugs are hard to ship. But either way, they were thrilled to dump them. And it's a shame, but I get it. It's not a garage build. You really need to have a fixture set up to weld the receiver chunks back. And you need to know what you're doing. But if you do, it's worthwhile. Now, I've been referring to this as the SA-24 or the VZ SA-24. That's the fixed stock. One other nice thing, unlike the 4352 where there's different receivers, this is fully interchangeable between the designs. If you look on the underside, there's a screw that holds the stock on. That's it. So if you need to go to the 26, the folder, remove one, install the other. Very good and quite simple but innovative. I'm not going to swap these on camera because we're on YouTube, but be right back. So it's just one big screw. It fits in there smooth but very tight. It's not going to come out on its own. Here's our fixed stock. Notice the bracket. And I don't typically use this rear swivel. I use the front one here so I can switch between stocks without having to unthread my sling all the time. And yeah, this goes on. There's not even a loose spring. There is a spring in the stock so it can fold. But actually the spring is captive inside. Very thoughtful, so it really is just one component in one screw. It's an all metal stock. It folds over if you don't get your sling caught in it. Come on. There we go. Slings. They're a double-edged sword. Actually, me putting slings on my guns drives Fox crazy, but he'll be alright. And it folds up here. What's neat, it actually can lock in up here to this. That's what that little nubbin was for up front. And even on the semi-auto, it locks just fine. Kind of carries along here. And that lets you actually use it in more of a machine pistol configuration with both hands. That was intentional. And it's actually reasonably comfortable. And finally, if you don't want that hanging down, you can fold it up. Now, because of this extension, it doesn't quite fold up all the way, almost, but just not quite. But that's okay, it's still locked on. Middle positions where it unlatches, you just use that little spring. Kind of just chivies down when I say that. Sometimes two hands are good. There we go. So yeah, it locks either front. See, it's locked. It goes up enough to lock. It's just a neat stock. Now, of course, it is all metal, so you're not getting the best cheek weld. Although it's a simple, it doesn't add a lot of weight at all to the gun. In fact, I think the wood stock is a little heavier, but you do get a much better cheek weld. So if it's a field use, guard duty, patrol, do that. But if you need something more compact or airborne, do this. So it hovers a little under to a little over 7 pounds, 32 rounds of Tokarev. I think it's reliable and good. I've heard different reports, but again, I think it's a good gun. So why was its production cut short? And why is it kind of a footnote in history? Well, there's a good reason for that. Alright guys, those who have been following the channel for a while, who know me, just be impressed I've gone this long without mentioning this gun. It is one of my favorites, always has been, always will be, the Czechoslovakian SA Vzor 58. Goddamn, I love this gun. And that shooting footage was actually from just a couple of months ago. Brought it out for the family to try. Need to bring it out again. Yeah, so they had these in production, but they were already working on what would become this. And nice gun. Almost every way better. For one, okay, this fires 7.62 by 39. This fires 7.62 by 25. 30 round mag, 32 round mag. This has a milled receiver. This is a machined tube, okay? 11-inch barrel, 15.5-inch barrel, or thereabouts. Overall length, okay, the subgun's a little bit shorter, with stock folded especially. But actually the rifle is lighter. It's under 6.5 pounds. This is 7 pounds. Weight matters a lot. And it's not a whole lot more complicated, and it's very reliable. It even has the swappable stock system with one screw in the back here. It's a little more involved because you have to remove the butt plate and everything from the fixed stock, but still, you can swap them, not specific receivers. It's such an excellent gun. So having this, and this was kind of a gun that was half assault rifle, the original military version, and half submachine gun in and of itself. And of course, in the PDW market, something that's very common today, the Czechs had what was at the time quite a revolutionary little gun, the VZ61, aka the Scorpion. So yeah, this ended up kind of being in the middle. There was a bigger brother, a little brother, and so the Tokarev cartridge and the submachine gun for it, it stayed in service in the 60s, but it was out of service into the 70s in Czechoslovakia, at least frontline, whereas the VZ58 stayed in production through the mid-80s and actually stayed in service well into the 21st century. They outdid themselves on this gun. And you can see some elements of this that were kind of first trialed out here. it just shows their very good attention to design detail. And there's not really one whiff of PPSH 41 or PPS 43 in this gun. And throughout this video, that's what I've been trying to do, is kind of shift further and further away. Some of the earlier ones were closer copies, and now we're to this. And as I alluded to earlier, there are a few others I don't have to show you, like the Chinese and the East German variants, but I think we've hit the highlights. These are the most common submachine guns for these calibers. And if you're interested in the VZ58, you might find one or two videos about it in the playlists and on this channel. You just might. Check it out if you're interested. And if you'd like to know more about this gun's history, I've done a couple of deep dives into it as well. And we end with these both folded up. Kind of interesting that the submachine gun folds to the left and the rifle folds to the right. The stocks are very similar, different folding hinge, but the strut's very similar. Of course, the rifle doesn't have a folding butt plate, but for all you get, it's just not that much longer. And again, it's actually lighter. So I get it in most ways. And again, as I said earlier in the video, that's kind of what spelled the end of the submachine gun at that era. It's come back today in more of the PDW form and whatnot, but through the 70s and 80s, it was really the dark times for the submachine gun. And right here you see a great case in point of why. They actually obsoleted, is that a word? Themselves. Now I've taken this one out and let Fox try it. I should do it again. I haven't quite yet broken him into older guns like this yet. Keep in mind, he's a millennial. I actually love millennials, they're just fine. But you know, he's getting out of that age of loving the tactical guns and starting to enjoy more wood and steel. It's a process. I went through it. I bet you did too. And as I said at the beginning of the video, those who've welcomed him, I sincerely appreciate it. He's family. I love him. I wouldn't say that out loud, but anyway. But please make him feel welcome. And for those who aren't quite getting it yet, he's not the tatted up, you know, Chad you think he is. He's actually been very kind to me over the years, and he's been very kind to my little brother. He's good people. So don't judge him maybe on the tats and stuff. I think he almost did that as a troll. I mean, that's definitely committing to the bit. But no, he really does seem to like guns. If you tuned into the Clayco 47 live stream, you heard him talk for 3 hours about guns. No one who doesn't like guns can keep it up. And again, he's the one that actually has been asking me for a year to join the channel, and after that, I relented, thinking he was serious. And he has been an immense help. Again, don't tell him I said that, but without his help, or J Rose, I couldn't get to the range, guys. I have to have help. So, you know, bear with us. But, yeah, of the guns we've looked at, which is your favorite? As far as the build and designs, this one probably is. As far as the history part and just the classic part, PPSH 41. So, and they're very different guns. I'd say these two are my favorites. So the one we began with and the one we're ending with are my faves. I really like the 43. They were inexpensive and a lot of fun, and they are technically an import. The M56 drove me crazy. The M49 57 was kind of a shot out of the blue that I didn't even know I wanted until I got one. And the in the 4352, it's basically just a modification. Quick and easy, a lot of fun. Yeah. Yep. So that's kind of my story time. If you're watching this on YouTube, we're going to wrap this up. If you've been watching it on Patreon, you've had a little bit longer of a video with a couple of small bloopers and outtakes and random ramblings and a little bit more personal talk, if you're into that. If not, I get it. I'm probably boring to you. Sometimes I put my own self to sleep, so no worries. But let's bring this all home. Alrighty, guys. Greatly appreciate it, whether you're reviewing on YouTube or Patreon. Hope this was a fun video. As I said at the beginning, let me know what you think about the Storytime videos. Do you like them? Do you like the more detailed historical dives? Do you like the more casual? And we will get some shooting done with various things. In fact, we've already recorded a few shooting videos, but I want to space those out because of winter weather and scheduling and all that. But trust me, we have not forgotten about it. I promise. But yeah, if you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. And any way you can help support the channel is greatly appreciated. But if you can't, we definitely understand. All I really ask is please continue to understand my own limitations when it comes to editing. And also understand that Fox is learning his groove, his style, and in my opinion is doing so very quickly. But we will be able to make some various improvements this year, I promise. And we'll try to get out and do more live streams and maybe travel, do some more location shooting now that all the crud's over from the last couple of years. Well, hope everyone has a good weekend. And also on behalf of Fox and Jero, for that matter, who's still around here too, we'll catch you very soon next time.